Now, Gulfport police are looking for a man accused of killing his wife and another man. The victims, Kitnik Graves and Elena Davis, were shot multiple times inside a home on Graves Avenue. We've learned from multiple police sources threats against Elena Davis have been building over the last few weeks. Police confirm she had a protection order against her husband, Christopher Antoine Davis, and he was wanted for felony domestic violence out of D'Iberville, and Gulfport police had no bond warrant on him for harassment.
On a quiet night in Gulfport, Mississippi, a love story turned deadly when a man consumed by jealousy ended the lives of two people who were simply trying to escape the wreckage of their past. Elena Davis, a woman known for her compassion and expertise as a counselor, thought she had found safety in the arms of a new love. She had left her abusive marriage behind, filing for a restraining order against her violent ex-husband, Christopher Antoine Davis. But Chris couldn't let go. His anger festered, and he stalked Elena at every turn, even attempted burning down their home in a fit of rage. In the midst of this chaos, Elena found refuge with Kitnik Graves, a seasoned MMA fighter whose quiet strength and protective nature made him the perfect shield against her tormentor. But even a trained fighter couldn't protect her from the depths of Chris's obsession. Despite everything, despite the restraining orders, the assault charges, and the looming threat, Elena believed she was safe. Kitnik believed he could protect her. But on November 26, 2024, that belief was shattered in the most horrific way imaginable. As they sat together, unaware of what was about to happen, Chris stormed into Kitnik's home, gun in hand. In a moment of unspeakable violence, both Elena and Kitnik were gunned down before they could even react. What drove Christopher Antoine Davis to commit this horrific act? How far can obsession go before it turns deadly? Join us as we unravel the shocking details of a tragic love triangle, and the tragic end to a woman's fight for freedom, a fight that cost her everything. This heartbreaking story serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers that can arise when domestic violence is left unchecked. Elena's tragic end and the loss of Kitnik Graves underscores the need for stronger protection for victims of abuse. While love can sometimes heal, in this case, it only fueled an obsession that led to violence and death. It's a story that should not be forgotten. Now we want to hear from you. Do you believe Elena's tragic end could have been prevented? What more could have been done to protect her and others like her from an abusive partner who refused to let go? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, as your voice matters in the conversation about justice and the realities of domestic violence. And if you or someone you know has experienced similar struggles, we urge you to share your experiences. Speaking out can make a difference, help others who might be suffering in silence, and ultimately bring awareness to the issue that impacts so many lives. This is not just one woman's story, it's a story that touches countless families. By sharing, we bring the conversation to light and help others find the strength to seek the help they need. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can spread awareness, spark discussions, and hopefully, make a change in how we address domestic violence in our communities. Your engagement matters more than ever. Elena Hinton was a woman who exuded warmth and compassion. A licensed professional counselor, she had spent her life helping others overcome their personal struggles, using her own experiences to guide those in need. Elena was the kind of person who could make a stranger feel like they were the most important person in the room. Her natural ability to listen, offer guidance, and provide solace made her beloved by many. She didn't just help people navigate their mental health issues, she inspired them to live better, fuller lives. Born and raised in Gulfport, Mississippi, Elena had always been a woman on a mission. A proud graduate of Tuskegee University and the University of Alabama, she earned her bachelor's and master's degrees with a clear vision, to help others. As she carved out a career as a counselor, Elena's passion for healing extended beyond the walls of her office. She was known for her side hustle as the cake therapist, a nickname she earned from combining her love for baking with her commitment to emotional wellness. Her cakes were not only a comfort to the taste buds but a way for her to connect with others on a deeper level. But despite her professional success and the many people whose lives she touched, Elena's personal life was anything but peaceful. Married to her first husband, John Fairley, she had hoped for stability, but the relationship was far from ideal. In the midst of her struggles with her marriage, Elena met someone who would change everything, Christopher Antoine Davis. Chris was charming, smooth-talking, and everything Elena thought she needed after years of emotional hardship. His ability to make her feel special, combined with his seemingly protective nature, convinced Elena to leave John and marry him in 2022. But as the days turned into months, the fairy tale romance began to unravel. Chris's temper emerged, and what once seemed like a safe relationship turned into a nightmare. Rumors have it that Chris' behavior towards Elena changed after he found out of her infidelity from a mutual friend. Though Elena tried to hold on to her hope for love, she found herself trapped. Arguments escalated into violence, and the man she had once married out of passion and hope soon became the man who threatened her life. But Elena, ever the fighter, took steps to protect herself, seeking a restraining order and filing for divorce. She did everything she could to break free from Chris's grasp. It was then, in the depths of her despair, that Elena met Kitnik Graves. Kitnik was a 52-year-old MMA fighter, a man whose career had shaped him into a powerful protector. With his calm demeanor and towering presence, Kitnik seemed like the perfect person to guard her heart from the chaos that had enveloped her life. His protective nature was apparent to everyone who knew him. As a seasoned fighter, Kitnik had mastered the art of control, not just over his opponents but over his own emotions. In a world that felt like it was slipping away from her, Kitnik was the rock Elena needed to feel safe again. But even Kitnik's imposing presence and training could not shield Elena from the storm that was brewing just beyond their doorstep. As their relationship grew, so did Chris's obsession. Elena had escaped one toxic relationship, but the past had a way of catching up with her. The story of Elena and Kitnik, however, is more than just the story of two people trying to find love and safety. It's a reflection of the dangerous, sometimes deadly consequences of domestic abuse, obsession, and the failure of systems designed to protect the vulnerable. In the small town of Gulfport, where everybody seemed to know each other's business, the once idyllic backdrop of palm trees and ocean views now felt ominous. The streets where Elena had once walked with hope were now tinged with dread. Gulfport, Mississippi, had witnessed countless relationships come and go, but none as tragic as the love triangle that would forever change the lives of three people. The setting, quiet, peaceful on the outside, was anything but. And it was here, on the quiet streets of Graves Avenue, that Elena's final moments would unfold. The man who had once vowed to love her, now consumed by rage, would stop at nothing to regain control, leading to a brutal act of violence that no one could have predicted. Elena Hinton never expected to find herself in an abusive marriage. When she first met Christopher Antoine Davis, he was charming, smooth, and filled with promises of a life full of love and adventure. Their connection was instant, and soon, Elena found herself swept off her feet. In those early days, Chris seemed perfect, attentive, affectionate, and protective. Elena, still recovering from the emotional scars of her previous marriage, saw in him a chance at happiness and security. But that illusion didn't last. As the days turned into months, something darker began to emerge in Chris. His temper, once barely noticeable, started to flare up. Small disagreements escalated into shouting matches, and soon physical aggression became a part of their routine. Elena, in an attempt to keep the peace, tried to downplay the bruises and the emotional scars that Chris inflicted. She told herself it was just a phase, that he loved her and would change. But the reality was far more sinister. What began as sporadic outbursts turned into a pattern of control and violence. Chris's jealousy grew with each passing day. He became increasingly possessive, questioning Elena's every move, isolating her from friends and family. What had once seemed like caring gestures, checking in on her constantly, questioning who she spoke to, where she went, soon morphed into a suffocating control that Elena couldn't escape. But perhaps the most terrifying shift was when Chris began to exert his power through fear, not love. The emotional abuse escalated, but it wasn't until one fateful night that things truly reached a breaking point. Chris physically assaulted Elena, leaving her bruised and broken. She feared for her life, for her children, and for her safety. The man who had promised her forever had turned into a monster. But Elena, despite her fear, took the brave step of filing for a restraining order. She sought help, reaching out to the authorities, but the threats only intensified. Chris's rage seemed uncontrollable, and soon, he attempted something that would change everything. One evening, as Elena was inside their home, Chris set it ablaze, knowing she was trapped inside. The fire raged, consuming what was once their shared life. By a miracle, Elena managed to escape with her life by the intervention of the fire department. The emotional scars would never heal. She had lived in fear for so long, and now her home, the one place that was supposed to offer safety, was gone. Elena's escape wasn't just about leaving an abusive man, it was about surviving. She couldn't live like this anymore. In the midst of the chaos, she found solace in Kitnik Graves, a man whose presence offered the kind of peace she hadn't known in years. Kitnik was the complete opposite of Chris, steady, calm, and protective. He seemed like the shield she so desperately needed. Kitnik, an experienced MMA fighter, was a man who knew how to protect himself and others. His quiet strength and unwavering confidence made Elena feel safe for the first time in a long while. But while Elena had taken steps to escape Chris's violence, she soon realized that escaping the past wasn't as simple as walking away. As her relationship with Kitnik deepened, so did the danger. Chris, fueled by rage and obsession, couldn't accept that Elena had left him. The love triangle that was starting to form between Elena, Chris, and Kitnik became a powder keg, each moment more dangerous than the last. Elena tried to move on, to rebuild her life, but Chris's presence loomed over every decision she made. The emotional complexity of her situation was undeniable. She was caught between the man who had hurt her, who had nearly taken her life, and the man who was now trying to protect her. But in Chris's mind, Elena was still his. He wasn't ready to let go, and his obsession with her grew to dangerous levels. What Elena had believed was her escape turned into a twisted, dangerous game of cat and mouse. As the months wore on, her relationship with Kitnik became a symbol of her hope for a new life, a new beginning. But Chris's relentless pursuit of her love, and his overwhelming need to control her, put them all in harm's way. Chris was no longer just an angry ex-husband. He was a man consumed by jealousy, willing to do whatever it took to regain control. And with every passing day, the tension mounted. The lines between love and obsession blurred, and the consequences of Elena's choices would soon be written in blood. The question wasn't if Chris would take action, it was when. And when that moment came, it would be nothing short of catastrophic. It had been building for months, the jealousy, the obsession, the suffocating control. But on the night of November 26, 2024, Chris Antoine Davis reached his breaking point. Elena had finally found refuge in the arms of another man. Kitnik Graves, the MMA fighter who had promised to protect her, had become more than just a source of safety. He was her chance at freedom, her hope for a new beginning, a life without fear. And in Chris's mind, that was a betrayal he would never accept. For weeks, Chris had been spiraling, consumed by the rage of losing control over Elena. He had tried everything to win her back, manipulation, threats, even violence. But every attempt only pushed her further away. And now, as he tracked her movements, his worst fears were realized. Elena was with Kitnik. Not only had she escaped his grip, but she had found the one thing he could never give her, peace. It wasn't just the idea of losing her that tore at him. It was the humiliation, the feeling of being replaced. Chris had spent so long controlling every aspect of her life, and now she had left him for someone stronger, someone more capable of protecting her than he ever could. That thought consumed him. It gnawed at his insides until he could no longer ignore it. Revenge was all that mattered now. With a cold, calculating fury, Chris stormed towards Kitnik's home. His mind was a whirlpool of violent thoughts, each one more desperate than the last. He wasn't coming for a conversation. He wasn't looking for closure. He was coming to reclaim what he felt was his. In his twisted mind, Elena owed him her loyalty, her love, and he would take it by force if necessary. As Chris approached the house, the weight of what he was about to do pressed down on him like a physical burden. He knew this was the point of no return, the moment when everything would change. No more second chances. No more excuses. With each step, he moved closer to the inevitable. This would be the final act, the conclusion to a story of obsession and rage that had lasted far too long. Kitnik, for all his strength, could not have prepared for what was about to unfold. He knew Elena had been through hell with Chris, but he never imagined that the ex-husband's jealousy would drive him to this. As Elena sat on the couch beside him, perhaps believing she was finally safe, the door to their sanctuary was about to shatter. Chris burst in, a man driven by a single purpose, to destroy. The sound of the door crashing open was the first sign of danger. The shock in Elena's eyes mirrored Kitnik's as they both turned to face the man who had been stalking them in the shadows for so long. Before either could react, Chris raised his weapon. The room fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the deafening crack of the gunshot. Elena and Kitnik barely had a moment to process what was happening before the violence consumed them. Chris's fury was unrestrained, each shot echoing in the small room, tearing through the air with brutal finality. There was no chance for escape, no chance to fight back. Just the sound of a man whose rage had finally found its outlet. In the end, both Elena and Kitnik lay lifeless on the floor, victims of a twisted love triangle that had been marred by violence and obsession. Chris, his mission accomplished, fled the scene as quickly as he had arrived. The silence that followed the gunfire was suffocating, an awful calm before the storm of reality hit. Witnesses who lived nearby described hearing the shots, but by the time they arrived at the scene it was too late. The door was broken, the house eerily still. The lives of two people, both caught in a web of love, fear and violence, had been extinguished in an instant. The police were called and officers flooded the area. What they discovered inside Kitnik's home would haunt them for days to come. The bodies of Elena Davis and Kitnik Graves, two lives taken by the man who had once vowed to protect her, were found in the living room. The immediate aftermath was a blur of flashing lights, chaotic scenes, and the crushing weight of tragedy. Police secured the area, but the emotional toll was already taking root in the community. Friends, family, and loved ones were left in disbelief, struggling to comprehend how someone so full of life, someone who had dedicated herself to helping others, had ended up a victim of such senseless violence. Elena's family was shattered by the news. Her children, already deprived of their mother's love, would now face a future marked by pain and loss. Kitnik's friends and family, who had watched him fight so many battles in the ring, were left to mourn the man who had only ever wanted to protect the woman he loved. The community, too, felt the ripples of the tragedy. It wasn't just the loss of two individuals, it was the loss of hope. A reminder of how deep obsession can run and how far someone will go when they refuse to accept rejection. Chris, now a fugitive, would soon become the subject of a massive manhunt. The police had no time to waste as the clock ticked down on their efforts to capture him. But no matter what they did, it would never bring back the lives that had been taken. The damage was done. The families were broken and the lives of Elena and Kitnik would never be the same. This wasn't just a story of a woman who tried to escape her abuser. This was the tragic reminder of how obsession can destroy everything in its path: love, life, and the possibility of a future. The final turn had come. And in its wake, nothing would ever be the same. Elena Hinton was not just a victim of a senseless act of violence. She was a woman who dedicated her life to helping others, offering solace to those in pain. As a licensed professional counselor, Elena poured her heart into her work, guiding her clients through their darkest hours, offering the kind of support that many others could not. Known affectionately as the cake therapist, Elena combined her love for baking with her professional expertise, finding ways to connect with people through both her culinary skills and her empathetic heart. She touched the lives of many, always going above and beyond to ensure that others felt seen and heard. But the tragedy that unfolded on November 26, 2024, shattered not only Elena's life but the lives of countless others who loved her. Elena's family, her children, her parents, and the people who cherished her, were left with an unbearable emptiness. A mother taken too soon. A daughter whose dreams were cut short. A friend whose kindness and strength would never be forgotten. Her passing left a void that could never be filled. Elena's children, already burdened by the chaos that had defined their mother's relationship with Chris, would now grow up without her guidance, her love, or her comfort. The ripple effect of Elena's death was felt by everyone who knew her, and the grief that followed was overwhelming. Kitnik Graves, too, was more than just a man caught in a tragic love triangle. He was a protector, a fighter who had always stood tall in the face of adversity. When Elena found herself drowning in fear and uncertainty, it was Kitnik who gave her the courage to move forward. Kitnik, with his quiet strength and unwavering sense of duty, had done everything he could to keep Elena safe. He had become the person she trusted to guard her from the nightmare that Chris had become. But in the end, no one could protect them from the madness that consumed Chris. Kitnik's legacy would be one of kindness and bravery, a man who had fought to protect those he loved, only to be tragically cut down in the process. In the wake of the murders, the emotional toll of the tragedy extended far beyond Elena's family and Kitnik's loved ones. The community, too, was devastated. Elena and Kitnik were not just victims. They were real people who had contributed to their community. Elena had helped countless individuals find healing, and Kitnik had shared his strength and expertise with so many. Their loss was a reminder of how quickly a life could be taken, how a moment of violence could forever alter the lives of so many others. The reactions online were a mix of grief, anger, and disbelief. Social media erupted with messages of mourning and outrage, as people struggled to process what had happened. Friends and family shared their tributes, remembering Elena as a woman who had always cared for others, and Kitnik as a man who had always been there when it mattered most. But with the sadness came anger. How could something so senseless happen? How could someone so full of life, so dedicated to helping others, be taken in such a brutal way? One commenter wrote, "Elena didn't deserve this. She spent her life helping others, only to be taken by the man who was supposed to love her." Another added, "Kitnik did everything he could to protect her. His legacy should be one of bravery and strength, not of tragedy. But as people reflected on the pain of losing these two individuals, another conversation started to emerge. The question that haunted many was how domestic violence could continue unchecked, how one person's obsession could lead to such a devastating outcome. Chris's actions sparked heated debates. Some felt sympathy for the mental toll that he may have experienced, but many others saw his actions as unforgivable. The overwhelming sentiment from the public was clear. Justice needed to be served, and Chris needed to face the consequences of his actions. As the investigation unfolded, the chilling details of Chris's violent past came to light. Authorities quickly pieced together the events that led to the murders. Chris's violent tendencies, his obsession with Elena, and his refusal to let go of her became the focal points of the investigation. He had left a trail of violence in his wake, and yet Elena's attempts to seek help, from filing a restraining order to seeking refuge with Kitnik, had failed to protect her from the man who refused to let her go. The systemic failures were apparent, and the question on everyone's mind was, how could this have been prevented? 2 days after the murders, Christopher Antoine Davis was captured by police in Gulfport. The news of his arrest brought little comfort to the families of Elena and Kitnik. While justice had been served in the form of an arrest, it could never undo the pain of losing two people who had meant so much to those around them. Chris now faced 2 counts of first-degree murder, along with charges for arson and assault, but for many the legal proceedings felt hollow. No verdict, no sentence could bring Elena and Kitnik back. The tragedy underscored the tragic reality that, despite the best efforts of those around her, Elena's life was still claimed by an abusive ex-husband who could not accept the end of their relationship. It's a grim reminder that domestic violence is not just a personal issue, it's a societal one. The failure to protect victims, the lack of resources for those trying to escape toxic relationships, and the absence of real consequences for perpetrators contribute to the horror stories that so often end in tragedy. Elena and Kitnik's families were left to mourn not just the loss of their loved ones, but the loss of a chance at a future that would never come. And as the legal process began to unfold, they were forced to grapple with a question that would haunt them forever. How could such a senseless act of violence have been prevented? The investigation into Chris's actions was just the beginning. But for Elena, Kitnik, and their families, the pain would last a lifetime. And the story of what happened in Gulfport serves as a haunting reminder of the dangers of obsession, the failure of systems designed to protect, and the devastating consequences when love turns into violence. As we reflect on the tragic loss of Elena and Kitnik, we are left to wonder, what could have been done to prevent this? Elena's story is not just one of love lost, but also of a systemic failure that allowed an abusive man to continue terrorizing her, despite her efforts to seek help. It's a painful reminder of how deeply domestic violence can permeate a person's life, and how difficult it is for victims to escape. Domestic violence remains one of the most persistent, devastating issues in our society. Elena tried everything to protect herself, from filing a restraining order to seeking refuge with Kitnik. But in the end, none of it was enough to save her. And while justice may have been served with the arrest of Chris, for many the question lingers, how many more lives will be shattered before real change happens? What do you think needs to change in the fight against domestic violence? Do you believe the system failed Elena, or was this tragedy an unavoidable outcome in a world where victims too often find themselves trapped? How can we better protect those at risk? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters in raising awareness and sparking the conversations that need to happen. This is more than just a story, it's a call for action. Domestic violence affects millions of people, and if we don't speak up, if we don't demand better protections, then stories like Elena's will continue. If this story touched you, or if you know someone who needs to hear it, please like, share, and subscribe. By sharing this video, we can ensure that the conversation about domestic violence reaches a wider audience, and we can keep raising awareness about the dangers, the consequences, and the need for change. Every time you share this video, you're helping to spread the message and potentially save someone's life. Together, we can make sure stories like Elena's get the attention they deserve, and perhaps, just perhaps, we can begin to create a world where no one has to live in fear.